Hello and welcome to Off the Beaten Tracks, the YouTube channel that's most often compared to the opening 30 minutes of Porgy and Bess. My first album today is Bootleg Hymn by Alexis Korner. It is a gatefold, as you can see. There's a lot of writing there, and there's a picture of young Mr. Alexis with a cigarette in his mouth, died of lung cancer. Probably that's why. This is on the Warner Brothers label, came out in 1972. The first two sides are most entirely taken up with his band, Blues Incorporated, which he formed in 1961. I'm going to read some of this. The bands, at times, included Jack Bruce, Ginger Baker, Charlie Watts, Long John Baldry, Graham Bond, Danny Thomas of Pentangle, Keith Richards, Brian Jones, Rod Stewart, John Mayall, and Jimmy Page. Several of these people play on this collection. Alexis was also instrumental in the formation and the naming of Free, which was actually named after his own band at the time, Free at Last. The second record consists of some of his solo stuff, plus a band called Duo, New Church, and CCS. There's even a song on here sung by Robert Plant. Apparently, Alexis was recording an entire album with Robert when Jimmy caught wind of this extraordinary singer and swooped in and stole him away to form the New Yardbirds and then Led Zeppelin. There are only two songs extant from those particular recording sessions. One of them, called Operator, is on here, and when you hear it, you're going to say, well, yes, that sounds like Led Zeppelin. It's precisely the kind of sound which was adopted, especially on that first album. I thoroughly enjoyed this. It's got great players, great songs. There's a lot of covers on here, but there are some originals. I would give this a 7.5, an 8, possibly if it was a tiny bit shorter. If you put this down to one album, which I don't know whether you could, it would certainly be probably a 9. This is something I'd certainly recommend. It's not a lot of money on Discogs. But unless you're like Emma at 8 Mile Low or Chris the Blues Guy and you wanted some kind of introduction to British blues, this would be an excellent start. Alexis was considered to be one of the guiding lights of the early British blues movement, and really I can't recommend this highly enough.
Okay, for my next album, I've got Kevin Lamb, Sailing Down the Years. This is on Arista. There you go. And this is from 1978. Kevin started out in the 70s in a folk trio covering Dylan songs. I don't know why. His voice sounds nothing like Dylan, but I guess Dylan was a popular guy. This has Andy Summers from The Police playing on it. It has Ray Cooper playing on this. For those of you who don't know, Ray is the principal percussionist for Elton John and has played on a lot of Eric Clapton stuff when Eric isn't pissed off at him. This is produced by Gary Lyons, who went on to produce Foreigner. Now, the musicianship is top-notch on this, and Kevin is a pretty good singer. Some of these songs probably even drift to that West Coast rocky thing with, even a little middle of the road sometimes. I would say these are good but not great songs. Really liked Back to the Farm. Other highlights, When My Love is a pretty nice ballad, and Room Service is one of the few rockers on here. He was enamored of the United States. Went there in the middle 70s when he was a very young man, and for some reason was given a Martin guitar. And he wanted to go back to the States. So he decided that he was going to sell the guitar, because it was a very nice guitar, bring them a bunch of money to pay for his ticket to go back to the States. So he put an ad in the paper. This was before the internet. This is like in the middle 70s. And he gets a knock at the door one day, and he opens the door, and somebody says, "Are you the person selling the Martin guitar?" And he says, "Yes." And the guy pulls out an Inland Revenue identification Turns out that, I don't know how they found this out, but when Mr. Lamb had brought the guitar back into England, he had not declared it. So they took the guitar. He didn't get any money, and he didn't get to keep his guitar. Inland Revenue took that. So he stayed in England. He did these 2 albums. Modicum of success, perhaps. Then he moved. I think he lived in Kentucky or something like that, and he toured and wrote apparently a lot in the United States, but never put out another album. Sad because, there was some talent here. I would have liked to have heard whatever else he's got, and I'm certainly going to look for his other album. My next album is this one. This is Buddy DeFranco, and he's playing Nelson Riddle's Cross Country Suite. I had to tape that 3 times because I couldn't say it. You say it 3 times quickly. Buddy is a clarinet player. This is from 1958 and in beautiful shape. It's on Dot Records, the old Dot label there. This, in parts, will remind you of like a soundtrack to an old Western. This kind of similar to guys like Aaron Copley and Gershwin in his more adventurous music, is trying to capture feelings, places, emotions of places in musical pieces, and this is no exception. Great Lakes and Gulf Coast are 2 very enjoyable songs on this. There's the odd spot where, because this is going from place to place to place, and you're trying to capture the feeling of those places, where the clarinet seems to be shoehorned in a little, but he is a clarinet player, and this is his album. He has every right to play on it. But again, it's one of those things where you're setting a mood, but every mood has to include a clarinet. That being said, really enjoyed this album. Would I listen to it as often as, say, Dark Side of the Moon? No. But if you're in the right mood, this would really hit that spot. And I'm going to give this a 7 to a 7.25. The cover, I love this cover. I'm going to give it an 8 to an 8.25. That's how much I revere this artwork. My next album is Fingerprintz. This is the very dab. This was the first of 3 albums by this band. They're the band. They're Scottish. When I bought this originally, my first copy of this, it was as a cheapie back in the early 80s. This is still a cheapie. It has remained constant in that financial requirement. I got this for $1. There's some nice guitar playing on this album. It's the singing that's the problem. The second song, I think, is called Wet Job, and it's spoken. It's spoken word over music, and you really can't understand a single word he's saying on it. Jimmy O'Neill's voice kind of reminds you of the Skids in a little bit with that raspy delivery. There's a song on this called Dancing With Myself. Billy Idol does not have anything to worry about, that this will remove the memory of his tune from the public's collective ear. This is an ordinary song. As I say, the guitar work is the best part of this. In fact, there's 2 instrumentals on here, which I would say were the best tracks on the album. That being said, Tough Luck on the second side is a pretty good, and it's kind of new wavy. It has a certain rockin' new wavy feel to it, but the rest of it is a little less than great that way. I know it's a little late in the day to advise these people, but I would tell them to get a new singer. I've seen a lot of people, though, on the internet give this and their other albums really good reviews. And alas, I do not share their view of this album. I'm going to give this a 6, and that's mostly for the guitar work. Remove the singing, maybe it gets a 6.5.
For my next album, this is Herve Vilard, and the album is Je m'aime Balance. This is on Trema Records from 1979. It's totally in French. Now, Hervé had a big international hit with his first album with a song called Capri C'est Fini, sold 3.5 million copies. This album is a little unusual. It starts off with a ludicrous keyboard. It sounds like something toy you'd buy for a 2-year-old. I don't know what they were thinking, but he was a big star. He sold millions of copies of albums. He had the album before this, in 1978, had a song called New on it, which sold 2 million copies in France. And a year after this album came out, he had a single called Herve Vilard, which sold 1 million copies. So this album just missed it by that much. So Steve Carlson is always complimenting me on some of the stories I tell behind the albums, behind the artists. And this one has a corker. So Herve, back in the middle to late 70s, put a big push on to become popular in South America, and he sold a lot of records there. And I think it was in 1978, right before this album came out. He was in Bolivia doing a concert, a big concert somewhere, and he looks down in the audience while he's singing, and who should he spy sitting right there in the audience in a good seat? Was Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon. Now, you know, how he recognized it, I'm sure if you're French, that's probably one of those faces that's embedded into your brain. And so he sees this guy, this monster, sitting in the audience, and after the concert he tells the authorities, which led to him being captured and then sent back to the World Crime Commission, and he was prosecuted. So Herve was the guy who helped capture the Butcher of Lyon. Now, back to the album. That's not quite as noble as his accomplishments on that front. I would give this a 5, mostly because I don't speak French. Perhaps it's, you know, it's that kind of middle of the road, Frenchy kind of stuff. I would say he was kind of like a Kenny Nolan or an Andy Williams type. The music's a bit drippy in spots and never really rocks it anywhere. I mean, you look at that face, he looks like he could rock it out a little bit. He doesn't. So anyway, I'll give this a 5. Perhaps if I spoke French, it might go up higher, but I don't, so it doesn't. Thank you for listening.
Okay. Okay.